Hey guys. Hey Justin.
Hey, how you doing, Sonnet?
I'm good. I'm so glad you're here joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have you. Um, let's see. I just want to give people a couple minutes to get on, make sure we're recording, everything's set up, we can hear you. We're good.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, welcome to the group. I'd love to just start with letting everybody know who you are, what you do. There's a chat going on. People are saying hi. I'll be kind of filtering the questions to you, but people can feel free to ask their questions as they come up and we go through things. You have a wealth of knowledge from so many different directions in production and songwriting and successes that you've had. And I think that this is going to be really inspirational for the songwriters and producers in this class. So I'll just let you start and let us know who you are and what you do and how you got to where you are today on December 13th.
It's been a long bus ride. Hi, Sam. How you doing? I know that guy. I started about 13 years ago. I moved to Nashville in 2002 after music school and was just playing in bands and ended up doing a bunch of touring as a keyboard player. And would just basically spend as much time on the road as I could, and then just long enough to save up for recording gear. And I would come off the road and have some time off and buy another piece and learn how to use it, and just try to collaborate with as many people as I could. And that turned into producing some records, and kind of from there, started working with a lot more LA-based artists. Toured with a guy named Matt Carney, and through that I ended up meeting a lot of Hotel Cafe singer-songwriters, ended up working a lot with Carrie Brothers and Garrison Starr, and they're still longtime collaborators of mine. And we've done a lot of TV and film music together, and through that, working with Secret Road. And so I did all that in LA, had a few different studios, and I still miss it. I still can't find a good breakfast burrito in Nashville. Maybe Sam can send me one. But it's been good. My girlfriend and I moved back down to Nashville about 2 years ago. And so since then, I've just been writing and producing and kind of doing what I was doing before, just in a little bit different landscape. And I still try to get to LA as much as I can. I don't know. It's been really good. I toured for the last 3 years with a band called the Lone Bellow. And it was great. We wrote the last record together, and in August I made the decision to kind of come off the road and just be writing full-time and producing full-time. And I've got a studio here where I'm a drummer primarily, so I do a lot of live drum tracking, and most of my production work is all based around doing it's a lot of live instruments. I do some programming, but it's mostly, I try to stick with kind of more of the organic approach to producing and recording. And so, I don't know, just the association with the whole Americana thing, I end up being, the organic producer guy. If somebody wants to do something in the Lumineers vein, I get that call a lot. But I love doing all of it. I love working with bands, and I would love to do more of that sort of work, but primarily what I end up doing is singer-songwriter stuff and Americana stuff, and it's been good. I love all of it. I'm super grateful.
Yeah, it sounds like, you have just a plethora of artists that you've worked with and music that you've created, and it's really inspiring. I was just looking through the list of names of people that you've worked with, and they're amazing.
Yeah, it's a good group. I'm glad they put up with me.
Yeah. So how does that work? And, we talk a lot about sync in our world and songwriting sync, and also staying true to who you are as an artist and writing from your heart and being, doing what it is that you do really well. And how have you seen that kind of play out with the artists that you work with, and licenses that they've gotten, and licenses that you've gotten with the work that you've written or produced, and also just the ones that have become successful for other reasons other than that? And like, is there a difference to you, or is there not, or what do you have to
I would say, as far as that goes, a lot of the artists that I work with already kind of have a very focused vision. They've released records. They have an idea of what they want their sound to be coming in. So it's a really good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And then the folks that don't, you ask questions like, is this something that you want to reflect your live show? Or is this something that you're really just kind of driving to pique people's interest in the licensing and film world,
Right.
or ad world? And then from there, you can kind of make decisions based on who that artist is, what their abilities are vocally, how their vocal sits in a track. I wouldn't take someone with a really quiet, kind of folky voice and try to build a dubstep track around it. It just doesn't typically work. There has to be some sort of emotional connection between the artist as a lyricist, the way that their vocal translates, and the track itself. And there are times where you get into that relationship and you try some things, and I'm okay with not being the guy.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of other friends, producers that I've worked with for years, either as a session musician, or we're just collaborators. And I'm like, maybe if you want to do a hip hop thing, this guy might be better. And being willing to like be open to sharing artists that you're excited about with that community. I'm grateful to live in a city where there's so many different things going on. And LA was the same. I lived in New York for a year. New York was the same. There's just so much talent, So being able to build a community around just effectively serving artists and serving the song is the most important thing. But I also love that writing for sync can be, and you and I talked about this a little earlier, it can be, you can play a role, if it's not something you're going to release on a record, if it's not something you're going to play in front of people all the time, it's specifically to set a mood. It's almost like acting.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of singers have just the gift of being able to sing in so many different styles or feel comfortable in different avenues. There's an artist that I work with a lot named Leah Nobel, and she works with a company here called Big Yellow Dog, and they do a lot of great sync work for her. But her stuff's amazing. It's very folky. It's very organic, and down to like, it's kind of similar to the first couple of Lucius records where there are electronic elements, but there's also a lot of real instruments and big drums, played live, kind of surrounding these, synthy textures. But the most success she's had is the stuff that she's done and we've done with her side project called Hail, which is just Leah backwards. And she I wasn't part of this, but she just got an Apple commercial with like a very synthy electronic track. And she's not going to be touring that music, and she's not going to be playing it live. But it's an amazing outlet, to be able to creatively, it keeps us all very interested. It's like exercising a muscle in a sense. So not being afraid of doing that. I have a quirky pop side project that I do with Garrison Starr called Unicorn. And it's totally different than anything she's ever released. And she and I sing together on it, and it's got a lot of like electronic textures behind it. And that's been great. It's been an amazing outlet for some of these songs that don't necessarily fit her as an artist, but sit in a place where they have a lot of potential for sync and for TV and film. And just knowing when you're going into the room and writing for that, and kind of telling the story with fewer words, using the bigger paintbrush and, painting with broader strokes is a good thing,
Yeah, I mean, those are things that we talk about all the time. I think it's a really cool delineation that you have there to say that, you get to try on a new character and you get to be in a different place and have this other outlet. And rather than looking at it like, oh, I don't want to try something new, it's like, well, maybe you have these other songs to write and you don't have to, you're not
totally
bound by one thing. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I think that like getting some of those songs out. Writer's block is real. I get that. But if you allow yourself to just keep on creating it, even if it's something, first off, finish everything, right? Every song deserves to come to a place where you see it as finished, even if it just allows you to move on to whatever the next thing is.
Right. I love that.
You don't need to keep rewriting a song when you could have rewritten 3 new ones and found one that was really special, because that one's sitting back there. It's in line. So like, get through it, push on. So.
That's awesome. I want to dive into specifically like some of your production expertise, because I know we have a lot of producers here and also a lot of artists that they go into a production session and they need to have more information about, how do I say what I need to say, or what am I looking for? And I know that we talked about your different thoughts about vocal, particularly a vocal session, and what your thoughts are, advice, or just different insight that you can give around that could help shed light for everybody here, maybe like how you do it or what your thoughts are around that and the vocal performance.
Yeah, I've done it a lot of different ways over the years. I've had studios that have vocal booths. I've had studios that have big open tracking rooms, and then I've lived in New York for a year, and all of my gear sat in a storage unit, so I had to do all of my vocals in a bedroom. And so, and I had studios in New York. Yeah, and I had studios in New York I worked out of too, and it was great. But I've come to realize that as the producer, the most direct interaction you can have with an artist or a singer while you're cutting the vocal, as long as the artist doesn't need that kind of privacy, which that's a really important thing too. As long as this is a process that the artist is comfortable with, I have found that just being as close as possible and being in the room and feeling kind of how the singer is feeling, and then being able to respond to it instantly, and not, I like the talkback mic. It's totally cool. It's right here. You can hit it and like talk to them, but being able to turn around and see this person and see kind of where they're at emotionally, and if there is a disconnect, also being able to like put their headphones on and make sure that what they're listening to is sounding so good that it's inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not inspired by, if the singer's not inspired by what they're hearing back, then you're not going to get the performance that, you're not going to reach that potential in performance.
Yeah.
I love being in my control room with singers. And a big help for that, for me, has been this little eyeball. And I'm not endorsing any of these guys. They don't pay me to do this. But this little thing, it's kind of like the sound reflection filter vibe, but it just works, and it's super portable, and the mic sits inside of it. This is an old AKG 414 that I use a lot for female vocals, and then I've got another one of these that I use for a really great tube mic. And the feedback that I've gotten from just being in the room with that person when they're not used to tracking that way has always been really positive. I think it's cool. The eyeball is amazing. It's super overpriced. It's like $200 for this stupid piece of foam, but it totally works. So especially if you live in a noisy place or a big city or something like that, where, I was using that in my apartment in Brooklyn with trash trucks going by and never lost a take. It was really great. So,
wow.
Or in the back lounge, I tracked in the back lounge of a tour bus with it, and just turned the generator off and do some recording. It was awesome. So, I think that having that, like, just, it's so instant, like your response can be so genuine and instant, and you connect with people more that way. I also try to keep a chain in my studio just for vocals. Right now it's a Perlman TM2 or TM1 tube mic, a Chandler TG2. I don't know, this is for the gear nerds. A Chandler TG2 preamplifier, an API 550B EQ, and then I've got an old Spectrasonics complementer that I really love for just a little bit of limiting and that kind of classic spongy compressor sound. And if like it just when you're writing a song with someone, if they can just stand up, walk over, put down their idea in the track, you can put it on the speakers, you hear it back right away, you know exactly if you're working in the right direction, because it's instant. And a lot of those vocals, if you have it set up and it's easy to access, those end up being a lot of times final vocals for me.
Yeah,
You know,
right. Magic.
so I also love the SM7 by Shure, which is great because the artist, like it, I can track with the speakers on. It rejects a lot of the sound. It's a very directional microphone, has a very tight pattern, and a lot of times I'll just hand it to the singer and they'll just hold it like they were holding an SM58 or any kind of vocal microphone, and they're instantly comfortable. They instantly feel like they're performing. There's an audience, you know, because they're feeling the sound come off the speakers. I learned that from working with a producer, Jay Joyce, here in town, and Jay does a lot of his vocals, especially for rock stuff, just speakers on, you know, sing away. It's amazing.
Wow,
So, yeah,
that's great insight. I love it.
yeah, it's super fun. There's no right or wrong when it comes to that, as long as it sounds good.
Right, right. As long as it sounds good. You're getting us a couple of gear questions. What's the brand of the eyeball?
Oh, it's called Chaotica with a K, Kaotica.
And then what's the board under your 500 series with the VU meters on it?
Oh yeah, I just got this this year. It's made by a company called Op Amp Labs. It's a 1974. I believe the model is a 1204. And it's a 12-channel 4-bus desk. And I just had I have individual outputs on all the channels now, and it literally is just for drums. So when I'm in a writing session, kind of the cool thing about this setup as a drummer is in my drum tracking room, I have a secondary screen and I have a mouse and everything next to that setup. So if I've got a couple of writers in my control room and we're, you know, plugging along and I've created some loops or maybe pulled some things from Splice or Machine and the track is starting to feel good, I'm like, this really does need some live drums. They start working on verse 2. I can actually just turn the console on, open up a template in my Pro Tools session or Logic, and by the time I get in there, the console's warmed up, all of the microphones are on, I hit record, I play down a couple of passes of it, find the idea, and by the time I come back in, they've usually got most of the second verse written, and we have real drums on the song.
Wow.
And so I can actually record real drums faster than I can usually program them in like Superior or Addictive Drummer. So I don't know, it makes for like a special energy when you kind of get that, if it starts sounding like a record, you know?
Yeah.
And the faster that you can get from point A to point B with the workflow, the better. If someone says, oh, hold on a second, I've got to unplug all of these things and plug this thing in so that we can record a vocal, and then, oh, we're going to do this thing, so I got to unplug all these things, and, you know, it ends up slowing things down, and again, it just gets, it gets in the way of the important stuff, you know? So, which is the song.
Yeah, right. And the process of that is also amazing too.
Totally.
One last. Tomorrow says, so the eyeball is for a home recording studio. That would be okay. She was going to add it to her home recording studio list.
Yeah. I mean, I see them all over the place, you know. I see them in big studios, but they work really great if you don't have an ideal setting, you know, if you don't have the perfectly tuned, you know, acoustical setting. A lot of times you can, if you're just putting a microphone up, you can get a lot of like weird reflections and things.
Oh, interesting.
And it just ends up being like, it doesn't sound like a record, you know. It doesn't sound, you don't have the control over what you can do with that sound later.
Yeah.
You know, you can always add ambience later, but you can't take it away once you record it. So, yeah.
Such good tips and info here.
Yeah, right on.
Love to hear all the gear info. I mean, that's like a little bit out of my world, but I know that it's so many other people love to talk about it and have so much equipment that, it makes sense. Cass says, do you think it's worth making a small padded vocal booth over an eyeball if you can, or is the eyeball that good that you don't need to build a booth?
I don't need a booth. That's the beauty of it. I mean, you can build a booth in a closet, really cheap, and it's cool. But you can't take that booth with you when you move your studio, or like when I travel so much to write, and I've got a road case that when I go to LA has my Universal Apollo Twin. It has a couple of microphones in it. Some odds and ends. Sometimes I'll bring some percussion stuff, or like real shakers and things like that, because that always helps a track move a lot of times better than loops do. And I can put this in there and I can bring it with me. So if I'm in an Airbnb in Santa Monica, I can have somebody come over and we can get a vocal that I can really work with. A lot of times you're not given, and I work with a lot of artists that either come to Nashville to write or I go to them to write. I work with a lot of Canadian artists. So when I go to Canada, I bring that with me, because I know that wherever we write, there's a lot of these writing rooms at publishing companies and things like that. If I'm working somewhere outside of Nashville, I know that I'm only going to have these few hours in this room with this artist, and I don't know what that room's going to sound like. Mm-hmm. I had the first time I ever used that thing was in a really terrible sounding room in Eagle Rock. I had just moved out of a studio. I was between places, and I had a thing with a songwriting session with Sarah Watkins from the band Nickel Creek. And I was like, this thing better work, because if I don't get this vocal from her, I don't know when I'll be able to do it again. And I got vocal and her violin in a really, really terrible sounding room. And
wow.
it sounded totally great.
Wow.
It was awesome. Yeah. So I was totally sold. So I bought a second one. It's awesome.
That's key info right there.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. Tamara says, forgive me if you mentioned this already, but what's your vocal tracking setup, travel setup? Eyeball, MacBook, what mic? Are those three things it?
I really love, I love my gear. I love the stuff that I have here at my space, but Universal Audio has done a really good job with the Apollo as an audio interface, and they've modeled a lot of preamps. They do a really good job with their API preamp, and they do a really good job with their Neve preamp. And the preamps are really clean. They don't sound like anything special. But as long as you can get a clean signal, you can mix it, and it sounds like it sounds professional. So I'll bring that, and I'll bring a couple of microphones. I'll bring this old 414 here, this guy, and then I'll bring a Shure SM7, and usually a really good sounding vintage guitar. I find that in writing sessions, having an instrument that has songs in it, that's inspiring to play, that is inspiring to listen to, is crucial. If your instrument doesn't inspire you, then sell it and find something that does.
Wow, such good tips here. I feel like everybody can go off and write songs tonight.
I hope so.
With all of this, yeah, and then record them. Antoine says, love the AKG 414 female vocals and by gear. Awesome. So you've got gear love over here. Awesome. What would be, so we've got all these different types of people. We've got producers, songwriters, singers. What are some other, I know you were talking about in vocal sessions, the way that somebody delivers the vocal. And did you want to get into that or talk about that or am I mistaken that that's not right?
Yeah, no, totally. I've noticed a lot over the years that you can tell when a person is, especially for sync, when a person is trying too hard. Obviously, delivering a great vocal can be really challenging. But at the end of the day, if I don't believe every word of it, If that person either is, if I can hear them thinking, then we have to change something. Maybe we have to go for a walk. Maybe we have to go, get a beer and come back and revisit it. Maybe it's just where that person's head is in that day. Just a lot of times when people send me music, and even with established songwriters, I can hear that person's still trying to figure out the song and still trying to figure out how to deliver it. And in some ways it's like taking a shoehorn and trying to put on that glass slipper that doesn't fit. It doesn't, you can't relate to it. You listen to, in a lot of times I tie this to a conversation. A vocal is just a conversation. Sometimes it's a one-way conversation. But you're literally delivering lyrics and trying to pique an interest and have someone relate to your story on some level, whether that's trying to sell sneakers or whether that's trying to help someone understand that they're okay and that they're loved. And I don't think those things are very different, I want to believe that you want me to wear those sneakers, and I want to believe that you want me to feel loved,
Yeah.
So I just feel like that's a really crucial thing, as opposed to just sounding good. It's way more important to believe it than it is for it to have the perfect pitch and to have the perfect delivery. I like quirkiness. I like when a vocal kind of falls out of time and falls back in time, and it feels human. It feels like you're going on a walk. It's not always the same pace. So I love that aspect of it. Whereas like drums, you want to feel this pulse. You want to like have it drive through. So as long as you've got a really solid bed, a really solid instrumental, then the vocal can take these liberties and just kind of like bend the time, and use that as it's not just the lyrics and it's not just the melody, but it is the time, it is the feel and the emotion, So that stuff's just as important to me, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's so important that as the producer and the songwriter that it's so valuable to be in a room with somebody like you who makes space for that and gives room to the singer, the performer, to really go there and really understand that like that's what's most valuable, because you can get into sessions where they're like, it's not, I can't hear exactly what you said, you didn't create it properly and you're a little bit behind beat, and you're like, yeah, and I meant to do that.
Totally.
That's
totally cool. And if it's not cool, I can fix it later.
Yeah, right. Allows for real magic to happen, like you said, and being in the same room with these people while you're creating, and just so much about the inspiration and the reason why we're musicians, not taking some of the overthinking out of it and putting the heart into making sure that the heart is in there all the time is so important, whether that's sync or for your personal record or whatever that is, because at the end of the day, we need to feel it.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, which I really appreciate you bringing, to light for all of us. It's a good reminder.
Yeah. I see this pitch correction question.
Yeah, go for it.
Yes, I do use some pitch correction. I'm in a lane in my career where a lot of the work that I do is more in the sometimes in the singer-songwriter Americana world. And so in that world, it's not so crucial to have things be completely locked to a grid, which is really cool. I'm doing a record right now for an artist named Hugh Masterson, and he's kind of a country Americana songwriter, and we tracked his record live here at the studio, full band. We did 7 songs in 2 days. I put an amazing band together for him, and a lot of the vocals that we got, we were able to keep, because he was singing to the band, and Some of it, he's playing acoustic guitar at the same time, so you can't really tune a vocal where there's instrument in it, but he sings better when he's playing.
Right.
And sometimes for some artists, like, that's the thing. And then there were some songs I was like, Hugh, I love you, but we're going to have to go back and re-record that vocal. Whether it was like maybe a new song, or he flubbed up a couple of chords and just wasn't as comfortable with that material. So we went back in and did it. And my approach with that kind of stuff, I mean, obviously with pop vocal, like, I love Melodyne. There's so much amazing stuff you can do with it. I use it for not just, vocals, but for manipulating other instruments. I can actually tune. I've got an out-of-tune accordion that I record all the time, and I can tune it with Melodyne. It's amazing.
Wow, that's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah, it's kind of awesome. But with that process, I'll typically take, if I'm comping a vocal, you get a bunch of different takes and you pick the best ones, but I don't just listen for pitch, because sometimes the take with the best pitch isn't the best take, isn't the most interesting. It's not the one that makes me want to dance, that makes me want to sing this song, or most importantly, like we just said, makes me believe that the singer actually believes what he's saying, he or she are saying. So I'll take a pitchier take that has more mojo to it and put it in the comp, and then I'll listen back through the whole thing. And if it's still bugging me pitch wise, I'll go back and tune it as a general rule.
Yeah.
So I try to leave it alone. And then I work with some folks that, certain gigs, like, you end up having to do more tuning than others, and that's just part of the job. Sometimes I work with some artists in New York, and, we do a lot of remote stuff. Everybody's all over the place. I'm sure you guys are spread all over. And if I work with an artist, like, I'll build a track. A lot of times I'll build a track here. We'll talk about it. I'll send it to them. They'll record a vocal at their home studio and then send it back to me. And I'll put that vocal in and mix it. And there's so much that can be done in real time, and fast turnarounds and home studios and all of this stuff. And some of that stuff, like, I do have to tune a little bit, because I haven't figured out a great way to be in the room, like, even over something like this, like a video conference, and produce a vocal. That's been kind of the hardest part. But a lot of these folks that I work with, we just have a system, and they know that if they give me 10 good vocal takes, that's way more than I probably need. Sometimes not, but most of the time it's okay, and we can build something together. I've done a half dozen records with an artist from New York, who is a Latin artist, and I don't speak a word of Spanish. But I've done all these records for them. They have a great studio up there. And sometimes it's like, hey man, you got to go back in and sing this one song a few more times. Like, I think you're really close. And he'll go back into his studio and work with his vocal producer there. And it's not an ideal setup. It's not as much fun as being in the room and being able to play off of each other emotionally and try things on the fly. But it's a really great functional way to make really quality recordings, at least for me. It's great for me, because then I get to be involved with artists that without this technology I never would have been able to meet or work with, so
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, we see that people are working remotely all the time, so there's lots of different ways to do it.
Yeah.
What are some of the trends that you've seen? I guess you kind of work you work even within, like, the more organic field. Like, there's so much variation to that. So what would you say are some of the trends that you've seen and you feel like are happening right now in music, as, like, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Wow. You still see a lot of the same things as you did 5 years ago. The biggest change I've seen is just in kind of the introduction of heavy electronic elements in trailer music, and writing for film trailers, and doing this kind of long arc where you end up with this big bombastic thing. And a lot of that music, you know, is programmed, is samples, is you know, you'll hear huge strings in a lot of these things. And I know, you know, when I do it or other producers do it, like they're using really great string sample libraries, or you know, they're using damaged drums from native instruments. Or I love Splice. You know, Splice is an amazing website, and it's a subscription service where you have access to virtually millions of samples, and they're all just incredible, and they're so easy to manipulate. There's a ton of Foley, there's a ton of like drops, a ton of loops, and stylistically it's all over the place. It's really amazing. That's been an incredible tool. And so for doing those trailer kind of things, yeah, and I Want That Sound is great. I use a lot of their stuff. And that stuff's awesome. But you have to, in my opinion, it works best when you supplement it with real sounds.
Yeah.
So if you have a really great hand clap sample, that's awesome. Use it, and then layer in some real hand claps with it. If you have a really amazing tom sample and you're a drummer, but you don't have a place to really record drums, use that tom sample, and then go back and get your crappy sounding tom and put a microphone on it. And maybe it's going to be distorted, but the changes every time you hit it, that subtle change of whether you hit it with your right hand or whether you hit it with your left hand, is going to make it feel like a person. And it's going to make it pop, you know, it's going to make it have that energy. You can also do sound replacing with drums, obviously, which is a totally different conversation. But so a really excellent piano sample is super important for this music, because a lot of it starts off with like really simple piano motifs and a very airy vocal, and that airy vocal gets bigger and bigger, and the piano gets bigger and bigger, and it has to grow. I was talking to my friend Lindsay Ray, who I write with a lot, we've written a lot together and worked together for years, and she does really well with sync, a lot of ad stuff, and she was sharing some stuff that was really even helpful for me that I hadn't really thought about, that now the stuff that's doing really well starts out really simple, and maybe it's quiet, and maybe it's got a lot of space in the track. And then with every section, with every new thing that comes, whether it's maybe the first chorus is just a little bigger and you add one element. Maybe if you're just playing acoustic guitar, first chorus hits, you add, you know, a chimey synth thing, or you add an 808 bass drum to the downbeat of every other bar, or you add, you know, and then you get to the next verse and it doesn't come back down, but it lifts just a little bit more. Maybe a background vocal comes in, maybe a string, a cello line, something to fill out the bottom end of it. And then by the time you get to that second chorus, it's just a little bit bigger. Maybe that's where the real drums kind of kick in, or your addictive drums, your sample library, things get a little busier. And because most of the time for film and television, it's one thing, but especially in the ad world, they're only going to use 30 to 60 seconds of this song.
Right.
So you're giving them so many options within this one thing. You're basically giving them 3 different songs. If they use the first verse and first chorus at most, because that's roughly 60 seconds, then that's one feeling. But if they start at your second verse and into your second chorus, that's now a totally different feeling. And if you have this big breakdown in your bridge with a build, that's a whole nother feeling. So there's just, and then you mute the vocal and you can go, okay, great. This is an amazing instrumental track. So you've added value by diversifying one song, and not just using stock sounds, like even just something as simple as like filtering out a piano or adding effects to it, a delay, or you know, any kind of super spacey reverb. I love the Valhalla reverbs and the Black Hole. I believe it's Eventide. Yeah, Eventide, that makes this Black Hole reverb plugin that sounds cavernous and really spacey. And if I have a really boring sound, then I'm like, I don't know if this is cool, and then I just throw that on it. I'm like, actually, that's kind of cool. I'm going to keep it. You know, like using those things as opposed to just searching around for sound. You can just get lost. I see Mark has a Nord back there. Like you can literally like go through the Nord and find a sound all day and then be like, oh, it's not quite right, and then just tweak with it and tweak with it, when you could have been on to the next song, or you could have been on to another idea. And a lot of times it's great to just, you guys have probably heard this, but to just step away from it and work on something else and come back to it. And if it's still inspiring, then that's great. Then you've done your job, you know? So where did this question begin? I get on these tangents. I love this stuff.
No, I love it. Just think that you bring such a refreshing energy to it, and have such a great perspective to bring in from the production side and the songwriting side. So everything you say is just awesome. We started at trends, and then we went to.
Oh yeah. Ukuleles are still real. I've got Miko coming over in a couple of days to do probably more ukulele music. She's a mom now, and so she's, it's probably more geared towards children, what we'll be doing. But you still see that stuff. You still see, the stuff that I see that's not going anywhere are just really simple arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at like Joshua James, or there's a guy in LA called named Brandon Zahersky. He goes under Rivers, and he's gotten a ton of sync stuff. And he and I just wrote one that's on hold right now for something, and it's literally just a doubled acoustic guitar, a doubled vocal, and a Fender Rhodes playing a counter melody, and that's all. I had it totally intended on adding more to that track. He sent it in to his people, and they were like, nope, we love it, send us the instrumental, and it's done. And so I was going to overthink it, So that's always helpful. You can stop yourself and like print a really simple version of a song and like have that. And then if you want to keep working on it and build it up, you can have a secondary version of it so easily when you bounce kind of through the process. And there's doubled, play it twice. Doubling an acoustic guitar would just be, if anybody listens to like Elliott Smith, usually his vocals, he's sung it even 4 or 5 times. Usually twice is great. And it gives you this kind of depth and this kind of slap back and vintage feel. It also can do wonders to cover up some blemishes without having to auto-tune. A doubled vocal is oftentimes a nice trick to do something, that adds a little bit of a different texture to the voice,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you can double an acoustic guitar instead of like trying to mic. If you only have one microphone, especially, it's really cool to get a really wide acoustic guitar sound, and have it sound really natural. We have 2 ears, so 2 microphones makes sense. But if you only have one microphone, just play it twice and then pan them out. Like, it's awesome. It's an amazing sound. I worked with Gary Jules for a long time, and that was the thing. He would double it with a nylon string and then double it with a regular acoustic. And that was it became part of his sound. And yet we had a lot of success with that,
Yeah.
So it's cool.
So many gems of information here. It's amazing.
I still get a lot of Lumineers briefs.
Uh-huh.
And that's been happening for years, which is totally cool.
Mm-hmm.
So less like the haze and the hose, but the brightness of the lyric and the feeling of that. But more recently, I've been seeing a lot of people looking for Lord Huron style, more like kind of droney ambient vocal things, which is super cool. I love that. I'm a huge fan of that band. So anytime I see a brief come in and they want that, it's great. And then, so much of it is the newer things I'm seeing are electronics. Hey, Sonnet.
Yeah, we got a couple of different sounds happening.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Nice. I'm trying to think what else came in. A funny story. You get these things coming in. I was on a writer's camp for Razor and Tie last year. I guess this story comes from, and I was in the room with Sarah Siskind, who's a great songwriter, and Andrew Combs, who's a great songwriter here from both from Nashville here. And we were working on a song, and the brief that we got that day was cool. But we got to talking about something, And it led to an idea that we all really loved, and we forgot about the brief, and we wrote a song, and the song was really great. It was really special. It was not what the brief was asking for that day. And the way that those work is Lindsay Wolfington, who's the music supervisor, was there. And she showed up at the studio to hear the song we were working on from the brief that she sent us that day. And we played it for her, and she was like, well, that's not the brief. And I said, is it a good song? And she said, it's an amazing song. Wait a second. And she got on her laptop and went through all of her emails and found a brief that fit the song, because the song was compelling, right?
Yeah.
If we had written to the brief that day, the song wouldn't have meant as much to us.
Wow.
And the song wouldn't have done anything. So when it comes to trends, like I use TuneFind, which is tunefind.com, to see what's getting a lot of licenses right now. I like to make playlists for myself in Spotify. You know, if I see a song that's like, that I dig, that's gotten a lot of love on TV and film, I make my playlists and do all of that stuff. And try to listen to that as much as I can. It's part of the job. You know, just like someone who writes bro country songs has to listen to bro country all day.
Yeah.
I'm glad I don't have to do that. I get to listen to songs I like.
Yeah.
So those are all really great outlets to hear like what's happening right now, you know?
Yeah, that's so great. And we talk about TuneFind, and I think that, you know, you talking about it, that you're like in it, doing this daily as your livelihood, and you do it too, like that just makes sense.
It's so awesome.
It's so awesome that somebody that is there. It's so awesome.
I don't know who's doing it or who's making money. I want to hug them.
Yeah, it's so helpful.
Yeah, it's incredible. Casey Truman told me about it years ago, and a couple of years ago, and I was blown away. For years I've just been like, how do I know? How do I find out, other than going to, you know, your website, you know, go to the Catch the Moon website, or go to Secret Road's website, or go and see what songs by what artists are being used.
Right.
And that's just like a super helpful way, because you're not thinking of it from the aspect of the company necessarily and the kind of work that they do, but it's broader strokes. Like you're seeing, wow, this metal song keeps getting used over and over again for video game trailers. I need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's something I should dig into, and that I would have a blast doing. So
Broader strokes. I like that. Okay, we are at 45-minute mark, so I want to leave a little bit of time for song feedback. And, Cass also just has a question here. How do you organize your song ideas, lyric snippets, chords, melody ideas, song starts, and finish every song? Do you have like a way of organizing them? And then I'm gonna post a link for your first song to listen to.
Cool. I'm the worst at that. It's taken the last couple of years. I actually had a songwriter, producer friend of mine in LA named Jeremy Silver, who's a super talented dude, writes a lot for Hitcher and does tons of ad stuff. And he's a way more organized person than I am. So I was like, sit down and teach me how you do this. So I have a program called iTalk on my iPhone. That's a really great format for catching ideas. It connects to my Dropbox, so that's been really good. I've got a whole folder full of stuff. It all backs up to my Dropbox, and and I try to like stay as organized with naming those files as I possibly can. I have 3 hard drives behind me. One is my sample library and my current work. Those kind of share a drive, and then I have an archive drive. And then I have a master backup of everything. So I have those 3 that I use. What is this thing Bill Loeffler told me about? Synchronize Pro X. It's a great backup software. It's kind of like Time Machine is on the Apple, OS. But it's really been awesome for me to just have all of my things archived, be able to, when I finish a mix, and I've delivered the song and I know that it's living on Sonnet's hard drive when I send it to her, or when it's living one of these supervisors that I work with, or one of the companies I work with, I put it in a drive that is, marked by year and by month. And I have tons of notes in there, like what was the purpose. And then I have a Google Sheets that is all of my co-writes, all of the splits, who owns the masters, if it gets used, how it was used, when it was used, was I paid for it, was I not paid for it. Those are super helpful. That's all just regular Google Sheets. And then the last thing I really love is I got rid of my SoundCloud, and I got a thing called SongSpace, which is a really cool platform for organizing ideas and organizing songs. So under one song in my songs, it's very similar to SoundCloud, but you can have publishing splits in there. You can have the lyrics. You can have everything from the original demo to the first mix to the second mix to the final mix to the instrumental, and you have all of these things. They're fully accessible through the app. So if you go down the road and, like the artist comes back and like, hey, do you have the original demo that we did for that? There was a thing in there that I really liked, and maybe we can go back and put that in the thing. I can say yes, and I send them a link to it. It's great. So SongSpace has been really awesome for staying organized. So I'm trying to be better.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're really actually quite on top of it.
I wasn't always.
Like a lot of really great info.
Also, if you're working everybody's working in these DAWs, right? We've all got these audio workstations. Mine is Pro Tools typically. I've had a thing that's really come back to haunt me in the last year or so when I switched versions of Pro Tools and I got rid of a bunch of plugins. Sam knows where I'm going with this. They stop working. Like eventually they stop working. If you don't, especially Waves, which I stopped using altogether. I owned a bunch of Waves, and you have to do this huge upgrade thing, and it was just ridiculous. So I had upgraded to FabFilter, and I'm using all the UA stuff, and the Slate stuff is all awesome. And I love the PSP stuff, so that's all nerdy things. But when you're in your session, if you can commit your plugins, commit your effects, print stems, it's so easy in Logic and in Pro Tools to do that. You have these features to save all of your settings. So basically you've got your audio, you've got your vocal track, say, and then there's probably an EQ, there's probably a de-esser, and there's probably a compressor, and you've done all of this work to mix it and get it to sound great. Yes, you have to keep up with the Waves thing. They'll probably go to a subscription service at some point. I'm just answering Antoine here, but you can commit it. So all of that work is there forever. It's now a new audio file. I had to bounce some stems out of some stuff that I didn't have those plugins for anymore. I had changed systems, and now even down to like I don't think I'll always be on Pro Tools, and it's which makes me sad because I really love the workflow of it. But now I know that I need to just commit all of the work that I've done in Pro Tools, in stems, even if it makes a mess of the session. But if the mix is done, it doesn't matter. It commits them to audio. So if you need to go back and access it and access your original mix, it just makes it so much easier. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes, I think it makes sense. If it doesn't, people can ask questions. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's so helpful. I think incredibly helpful.
Because people will go years. This has happened several times where I write a song, I send it to a company that the artist and I are working with, and it doesn't do anything. And then it sits on somebody's hard drive, and then all of a sudden, it's like I get an email 2.5 years. This has happened 2 or 3 times where like literally 2.5 years have gone by, and the licensing company goes, "Hey, I need isolated drums, and I need isolated acoustic guitars and stems for this song that you did with." One was with Garrison Starr, and I went back to that folder and I was like, okay, and I clicked on the session and like half of the stuff like didn't open up, and I was like, okay, now I'm starting from scratch. And nobody wants to do that. You know, it's not, you never know when the song is going to get used. So just commit. When everybody was working on tape, it was easy. It was tape is tape, and that's just what you get. You know, it's awesome. But, you know, there's so many wonderful things you can do with this technology, and figuring out a way to give it a longer shelf life is really important. I think that's what that does. I'll stop talking. We need to listen to some music.
No, I love it. I love it. I think everybody here is just like, yeah, it's so helpful. And we haven't addressed that. You know, we haven't talked about that from what kind of things do you save? How do you save it? How do you organize it? So that's so helpful. And it's true, you know, we'll ask for stems when something comes up sometimes, and they're like, you know, you don't want to be scrambling for those.
Totally.
So important.
Also, Backblaze is another thing that I use that is a cloud-based backup service. And it's fantastic. So if I create a new file on my computer, it sends it up to the cloud. Any new file that I make on my computer, an entire complete copy of my computer is saved on Backblaze's servers. So if something happened to my computer, or if I'm working with a client and my hard drive crashes and we've been working for 2 weeks on a record, I know that it'll take 24 hours, but they can send me a USB drive with my computer on it, and I'll get all that work back. So I sleep better doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Okay, so I posted a link. I'm just looking at these questions too, which I guess you are too. Well, let's listen to this link here. This is from Ellie, and she actually has a bunch of questions that go along with it.
Cool.
So I'm going to read you these questions. Well, let's see. I'm trying to actually copy this questions, but they're not letting me copy and paste it into the chat. Maybe I can take a screenshot and send you the screenshot. I wonder if I can do that. Because I think that you probably want to hear what she's asking about. She has some specifics here.
Okay.
Okay, maybe I have to read them, but I don't know how you're going to keep track of them all. She's very detailed in her question for you. Let me try this if this doesn't work. No, I can't drag it. Okay, I'm just going to read them. Okay, so question 1, she wants to know, she got feedback that the second verse should go first. And the second verse is easier to digest and goes right in rather than current verse. She's wondering what you might think about that. And would it improve our chances of sync to have slightly less I'm a guy kind of lyrics and go more universal, non-romantic? And she tried A-Bing a few things with more reverb and better EQ and thought that the drive forward sound seems to marry well with visuals. Does that seem to be true to you? Let's start with those 3 questions.
Okay.
I'll remind you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We'll get back into it.
Great.
Flaky and fickle are just 2 words I don't even put in my vocabulary, 'cause I'm the kind of guy that keeps it old school. What I got to offer's more than ordinary. Cause if you're spinning your wheels and standing still, or pushing a boulder up a hill, I will be there to see you through. 'Cause baby, I got you. Floating so high, light as a feather, sharing my good times when we're together. 'Cause I'm the kind of guy that plays it cool. There's sunny till you share, baby, I got you. But if you're spinning your wheels and standing still, or pushing a boulder up.
Okay, cool. I love it. So a couple of thoughts.
So she's actually on here, so I'm gonna just unmute her, and then you guys can chit chat.
Cool. I think that the whether the first if it makes sense in the story the way you wrote it, then the order is just kind of up to how you want to portray it. I love the cheekiness of that second verse. I think it's really cool. So that wouldn't be a thing that like right away I would go, that's a deal breaker for this song. The thing that I noticed the most is the mix. Like it could use a little mix help, especially with a male vocal. When you think about where my voice sits, we probably have a similar range. I know that I need to pull out some of the frequencies that my voice takes up out of the guitar. Otherwise, those two things are fighting each other. You want them to feel complementary and not fighting. And in this mix, there's a little bit of that. And I would say that the ambience question for a song like this, I don't know if other instruments come in later, but the thing I did notice about the really dry vocal and the really kind of wet acoustic guitar is that it doesn't feel like I'm sitting in front of a person playing acoustic guitar and singing this song to me. And that's what I want from it. When there's that much space and like beautiful performance to the thing, like I want it to feel live. And what can help that oftentimes is using similar ambience, using the same ambience as on the vocal as you're using on the guitar. So maybe there's too much reverb on the guitar and not enough on the vocal, and you can find that balance. A lot of people will be like, well, this is my vocal reverb and this is my guitar reverb. I see reverb as glue. It's a great tool to be able to tie all of this together. I don't think that vocal's too dry. I think the guitar's too wet. So and there's things that you can do to like set it apart too. You could put a slapback delay on the vocal but not on the guitar, and that would give kind of a quirkiness that would help put that vocal a little bit more to the front. A lot of times that works great. And then but still use similar ambience for similar reverb for that guitar and for the vocal to help glue those together. That's what I try to do. So how do you remove competing frequencies between guitar and vocals? Well, I think one of the nice things about, like, say, like a bass guitar, at least the way that I like to mix it, and I've worked with a lot of other mixers who do the same thing, is if you solo if I'm done with a mix and you go in and solo the bass guitar, it sounds like hot garbage. It's not what you would want a bass guitar to sound like. Because it's taking up so much space. But what it does is it sits in the mix with the kit. You want the kick drum to take up its space and the bass guitar to take up its space. So ideally, especially if there's a lot going on or there's big electric guitars in the track, it's not necessarily going to sound really good by itself. That acoustic, if you take all of that, probably I would say 450 to 650 hertz out of that acoustic guitar, it's not what you would necessarily want from a guitar that's solo, but what it's going to do is it's going to make a lot of room for that vocal and for the fundamental note that the person is singing, so
Ellie, I unmuted you if you had more questions to ask, because I know that there's about 4 that she wrote. Or you can write them in, or we can move on to the next person.
Don't be shy, y'all.
Okay, I'm going to get the other link ready just
Great.
as figure that out. And I know there's another tech question that came up too, so I'll find that too, because we're loving what you're sharing with us today.
Cool.
Amazing. Yeah.
The two bus question. I hope you get feeling better, Sonnet.
Sorry.
It's okay. I can't catch it from here.
Eating cough drops like they're candy over here.
Nice. So, the two bus question about bouncing stems out. So I turn any kind of compression on the tube bus, I turn it off. If there's like a tape saturation or some kind of EQ, I leave it on. So when you're printing your guitars, and you're printing your drums, and you're printing all of your background vocals and all of that stuff, it's not like changing the way that the compressor reacts. It won't really affect much if it's just an EQ. But a compressor, if you put less signal through it, it's going to be trying to pick that signal up. So turn the compressor off, bounce your stems, make a new session with all of those stems, and import your compressor to your new master bus, and then turn it on. If you want to hear what your actual mix sounded like, that'll get you a lot closer. I hope that helps.
Amazing. You did it for me. Okay, so there's another link there that I posted.
Cool.
And this is, doesn't say who it's from. Let me see if it says it. Who posted the second link here? Maybe they're on here.
It's just Ed Sheeran. I'm kidding.
It might have been Nancy, because she's the last person to edit this. So maybe it's Nancy? Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Nancy.
Yay. Okay. Hey, Nancy. Let's listen. Oh, that's not the right one. Let me find it. Sorry. Okay. Beautiful Life.
I will take a step to you if you will take a step to me, and we won't have to stand here alone. I would carry you over the hillside, carry you out from the dark side, carry you all the way home. Ooh, 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 ooh. It's a beautiful life. It's a beautiful life. It's beautiful. Sometimes we forget. It's a beautiful life. It's a beautiful life. It ain't over yet. Look up. Tell me what you see. Rain clouds. Well, they don't fall.
Nice. Beautiful. So awesome voice. It's the vocals really well performed. You're obviously a great singer. Singers need to drink water. I know this sounds gross. Drink water. Just be pounding water when you're tracking your vocal. There's nothing more annoying than mouth noises. Oh, it's super rough. Well, that's good to know too. I think the song is really, really cool. You know, it's so simple to get a really good sound. You know, obviously never plug your acoustic guitar directly into your M-Box or whatever you're using. Focus on getting that good acoustic guitar sound. Get a sound that inspires you. You know, listen to other records that you know, that you can compare it, kind of what this sound should sound like, and try to figure out like how to get those you know, get those close. I think it's a really, really great song. I think this is one of those songs that could really be like benefit from a doubled vocal. I think that could be really cool and a really interesting texture. You know, I think you could dry up the mix a little bit more. There's also, after that first chorus, there's that beautiful break there, which is really, really cool. The song's amazing. I think it would be awesome to give it a little bit of breath before getting into that second verse. Find a counter melody, an ooh, or something that's like super singable coming out of that. Because you just dive right into more words. And with sync, a lot of times you're just looking for something that's really simple, and you're looking for these little nuggets to grab onto. And if you just keep giving words and words and words, it has to be such a specific thing. Basically, whatever the scene is that you're supporting has to be basically written around the song, the more specific you get. So keep it simple. You can really simplify some of that stuff. I think that's really important. So, oh, I think, did I lose you? Is that my fault?
No, it's me. I muted myself.
Oh.
I forgot
Cool.
I muted myself. It's me.
Cool.
So I think that answers her question. She also said she wanted to know your specific thoughts on the song writing, the song itself. But I think you got into that. But if there's something more there, Nancy, just let us know.
When I first listen to things, I mean, I'm like totally floored. It's a beautiful vocal. And so that's what I ended up listening to.
Yeah, right.
And like the first thing I can hear is okay, the guitar could use some work, you know, it's played really well, but it doesn't necessarily sound super good. And but I would love to hear it again. You could totally email it to me and I could give you more constructive feedback on kind of lyric and direction for sure. I'd love that. Be awesome.
Speaking of which, if people want to work with you or they want to work with you, I don't know, send you a song or something.
Yeah, totally.
Can they get in touch with you? What's your email, or how do you want to go about doing that?
Yeah, I'll just write it in the chat here. I've taken down I just went through a management change, and so all of the music that I had on my old management website is now down, so I'm between websites. So if I can share music with any of you, like, feel free to email me. I can send you some stuff that I'm working on, and I'd love to hear what you're working on too. I mean, this has been a total blast. Is there another song?
Yeah, there's more. I just posted. It's by C.F. Jones.
C.F. Jones.
It's up a couple comments.
Cool. All right, let's give it a listen.
I'm gonna make you feel so good, 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 good. I'm gonna make you feel so good, 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 good. When the world is spinning round and you feel like you're halfway down, I'm gonna make you feel so good, 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 good. I'm gonna make you feel so good, 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 good. I'm gonna make a sunshine day, sunshine day. I'm gonna make a sunshine day, sunshine day, sunshine day. When the light is dark and lonely, I will be your one and only. I'm gonna make you feel so good, 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 good. I'm gonna make you feel so good, 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 good.
Cool. So a couple of thoughts. The arrangement's really interesting. It's cool. I love all the orchestration in it. It's because there's not something that's kind of like flowing through it, like a arpeggiated piano part or an arpeggiated guitar part or something. It feels really jerky. It feels a little bit like stop and start. I can't find a pulse in it. And I think for sync, you want this happy, groovy, fun, like you want to be able to clap to it. You want it to get stuck in your head. This is definitely going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the day, which is awesome. So great. I think that there is a fine balance between keeping it simple and also keeping it unique. I think the use of the lyric good, once it's already been said in the first half of the chorus, once you get to that second half, I love that melody there, but I want to hear something else, whether it's like some sort of ooze or just a different lyric. Say something else. You've got a little bit of room there. It can be simple. You've already set it up for whatever the next thing is, and if the next thing is more of the thing that you've already set up, then we're spinning our wheels a little bit. but I love when that piano comes in, when like you get to that bridge, like, oh, that's the feeling that I want from the first half of the song. So, and also the vocals really cool, but it's like really, really on, like straight. It doesn't swing. It doesn't have like some of those like little idiosyncrasies that a tune like this should have, you know, for me. And I think the sounds are really cool. I think you could put some like real claps in there that would be cool. I think you could use maybe a real tambourine. Tambourines are super cheap, and we should all own 15 of them because they're awesome. It's proof that God wants us to be happy. But you know, like having that real thing in there that like one of them kind of shakes a little bit differently, you know, maybe one's like and the other one's like like maybe there's just, and it only does that the first time. Like make it interesting, you know. Ear candy is the thing. Maybe switch, like that tambourine's sitting over here, it's on my right side, at least in my studio. What's happening on the left? Let's find some claps over there. Let's fill this space and balance it, you know. Listen to everything with headphones, because you know, which like Steven's doing now. You know, like, because you get the balance, and that's what most people are listening to their music on anyways, you know. So you want to feel like everything is in the same zone. I love putting a drum kit off to the left side. I mean, the Beatles were doing that forever. But then the bass guitar is over on the right, or the rhythm guitar is over on the right. And I have this thing I can lay back into it, and it feels great. So I love it. But yeah, there's a few things. Definitely keep working on it. It's awesome.
Such great feedback, because it's so applicable and it's so detailed, and I think that's incredibly helpful, so thank you.
Sure thing.
Thank you for sharing so much with us today. I think it was, you know, really refreshing, so much information that we don't always cover, we don't always hear about, we don't always get that, like, you know, real live hands-on producer experience, and you really let us in, and thank you for doing that.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. And please send me more music. I love it. I'd love to hear from y'all. Great.
Well, everybody has your email, and it looks like it's already dark over there.
Yes. Oh.
Happened so quickly. We're here in the middle of winter. But we're so excited to know you, and we'll all stay in touch.
My pleasure. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Bye.